Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the world of Bitcoin. Well, not just the techie stuff, We've got this pile of sources, and honestly, they read like a modern myth. And right at the center, the Winklevoss twins.
It really is kind of wild how fast Bitcoin's gotten all these almost mythical stories around it.
Right. I mean, it's barely been around for a decade. And already, you got these stories about rebellion, right, and striking it rich, going up against the man, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you want to get to the bottom of it. Like, what is it about Bitcoin that's so captivating? And let's be real, the Winklevoss twins going all in just adds to the whole thing, right?
Totally. It's like they're kind of this archetype, these Olympic rowers. They just went head to head with Zuckerberg over Facebook. It's almost like they're like modern day Theseus or something going up against the big bad financial system.
Okay, I am so here for this analogy. So walk us through it. How do these guys, the Winklevosses, how do they go from rowing champs to like Bitcoin superstars?
So they're looking for something, right? Something more, something beyond how we normally think of power and success. And you got to remember, these guys feel cheated by the system. And back then, Bitcoin, it was this radical idea, this whole digital Wild West where nobody had written the rules yet.
And that's where Charlie Shrem comes in, right? This ball of energy all about Bitcoin.
Exactly. Shrem, he's like the embodiment of that early, almost religious fervor around Bitcoin. He's crucial for the Winklevoss twins. He's the one showing them the ropes in this whole new world.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, is it? That story about the Oasis startup. Can you imagine, like, flying out to California, money ready to go, ready to invest in this revolutionary thing, and they're like, nah, sorry, we're swamped.
Kind of hilarious, right? But it just shows you how crazy those early days were. It's like the gold rush, but instead of picks and shovels, it's code and what are they called? Cryptographic keys?
It's straight out of a Western, but with, like, chat rooms and blockchain explorers instead of saloons.
And just like the Wild West, there's this undercurrent of danger, like something lurking just below the surface.
You're talking about Silk Road, right?
Bingo. That whole online black market thing, it blew up and it became basically synonymous with Bitcoin. That's where this whole myth thing, it takes a darker turn.
It's that classic story, right? The promise of crazy wealth and freedom. But then there's this potential for greed, for people to break bad, It brings out the worst in people.
And just like those old myths, it's a warning, right? Bitcoin can be a force for good, but it can also cause a lot of harm. It's got both.
So it's like this Wild West, right, but with Bitcoin, you got this utopian ideal, this whole financial system that's free from, like, the government breathing down your neck. But then at the same time, it's super risky, right? Like, things could go south real quick. That's a lot to process for anyone, especially for newbies like the Winklevoss twins.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you got to remember, this is all going down while the whole financial world is kind of shaky. You've got the Cyprus banking crisis happening right around then, and boom, Bitcoin's not just some theory anymore. It's like a potential escape route.
People are like, okay, the old system's busted. They need a new plan. And Bitcoin's sitting there like, hey, what's up? Decentralized and secure over here. It starts to look pretty good.
Totally. It's like the phoenix, rising from the ashes. Bitcoin, this thing that seemed kind of out there, suddenly it's a symbol of hope. Like maybe it can fix the old system,
But not everyone's buying it, right? Weren't the Winklevoss twins hitting some walls trying to make Bitcoin mainstream?
Oh, totally. Wall Street's skeptical, regulators are pushing back, and some of the tech world, straight up hostile. Remember that Bitcoin is evil piece?
Yeah.
They were basically called out as like heretics messing with the powers that be.
Which, I mean, they kind of were right. They wanted to change the entire game for money and finance.
Exactly. And that's what makes it feel like a myth, right? The rebel, the innovator, going up against the big dogs. Classic.
And they even had people in the Bitcoin world against them, right?
Yeah.
Especially with that Bitcoin ETF thing. That sounded very Wall Street.
Yeah, their whole vision kind of clashed with that old school anti-establishment Bitcoin vibe. It shows how weird it is, right? You want mainstream, but you also want to be totally separate from the system.
It's like, pick a side, How do you fight the system from the inside? Don't you just become part of it?
Right. And poor Charlie Shrem, he's stuck in the middle trying to build his business BitInstant.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't just the tech stuff, right? He had to deal with all these different opinions about Bitcoin's future, too.
He's got the Winklevoss twins who are like, let's make it legit. And then guys like Roger Ver who are all about that radical anti-establishment approach. It's like a tiny version of the whole Bitcoin fight.
And then, as if things weren't crazy enough, Shrem gets busted for money laundering.
Talk about a plot twist. Suddenly, all that risk, that danger everyone felt, It's real. And for the people who thought Bitcoin was for criminals, it just proved their point.
Talk about flying too close to the sun, right?
Yeah.
They had these big dreams, and boom, it all comes crashing down. But even with Shrem down for the count, Bitcoin just keeps getting more valuable.
And that's what makes this whole thing so captivating, right? Every time you think it's down for the count, Bitcoin's like, nope, I'm good. It's like, it's got this energy, this belief behind it, and people are sure it's going to change everything.
It's like the myth never dies, right? Doesn't matter how many problems, how many times it gets knocked down, the story just keeps going. It's like it's got a life of its own. It's like we're watching one of those epic stories play out, these guys larger than life wrestling with their ambitions, their ideals, and like destiny itself.
Yeah.
But through it all, through all the drama, Bitcoin just keeps climbing. It's unstoppable.
Absolutely. And you know that scene at Burning Man? Talk about a perfect image.
Okay, so they're surrounded by this whole like anti-establishment vibe, right? This total rejection of the system.
Mm.
But at the same time, they're getting richer and richer, which is kind of the opposite of what Burning Man's about, right?
Right. It's this total contradiction. And it gets at that big question about Bitcoin, Can you really fight the man from the inside? Or do you just end up becoming the man yourself?
It's like they want it both ways. And then, as if to prove the point, you've got that part where they're explaining Bitcoin to Ron Burkle, that billionaire, and they're on a private jet, no less. A little different from those early Bitcoin guys, huh?
It's almost too perfect, right? This thing that was supposed to tear down the whole financial elite, and they're pitching it on a private jet. It just goes to show things change fast.
Makes you wonder, what would those early Bitcoin guys think about all this? Did they picture billionaires trading Bitcoin on their yachts? Or was it supposed to be something totally different, something more radical?
Who knows? But that's what makes it so interesting, right? It's about our hopes and fears for tech, for money, for the future, the whole thing.
So where does that leave us? What's the big takeaway from all this whole Bitcoin saga with the Winklevoss twins?
I think it reminds us that the stories we tell about tech are just as important as the tech itself. Bitcoin's like, it's like any powerful tool, right? It's a mirror to the people using it. It's about ambition, about wanting something better, about wanting to be part of something big.
And the story's not over yet.
Yeah.
Right? Who knows what'll happen next?
One thing's for sure, though, it's going to be wild. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. Until next time, keep digging for those stories that shape our world.